I'm excited to turn it over to get our ERG leader roundtable discussion going. So again, our hope is to really make this session just as interactive as this morning's session with John. So our hope is that you will have questions to ask other folks. You will have some best practices, some strategy to share. So if you can join us on camera, we'd love to see you so that we can all know who's here and who's helping to engage in the conversation. But if not, we still hope that you will add content in the chat section or that you will unmute yourself when the time is available to share comments or questions. And so with that, Roxanne and Michael, I'll turn it to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Hi, everyone. My name is Roxanne Meyer. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Vice President of the Board for the Chamber of Commerce, LGBT Chamber of Commerce of Illinois. I am also an underwriter for CNA Insurance, so I do nursing homes there. I'm looking forward to helping to lead this session. In terms of a few housekeeping items, like Jeremy said, if you can come on video, that's great. So I certainly understand if you don't feel comfortable. But if you could introduce yourselves when you're speaking with your names, your pronouns, and your company, that would be really helpful. And then as well, so we just don't have a lot of people speaking over each other, if you can use the reactions button in Zoom to raise your hand, that will just help us moderate the conversation. Last item, I'll give a description for accessibility for those who may be vision impaired. I am a light-skinned Hispanic woman in her late 20s with brown shoulder-length hair and brown rimmed glasses. I have my background blurred for Zoom because my room is messy. You may also hear some noises coming from the background. Those are my two cats, so I do apologize for that. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Michael.
Thank you, Roxanne. I appreciate you kicking us off, and thank you, Jeremy, for the introduction as well. I'm Michael Nordman, he, him, his pronouns. I work at MolsonCoors Beverage Company. I am in community affairs, so I'm a senior manager of community affairs, which really means that I get to work with all the great nonprofit organizations that we support, including the LGBT Chamber, which I'm proud to be a board member of. In my role, I've been here for 5 years. I also participate actively in our ERG, which we call Logger, our LGBTQ ERG here at MolsonCoors. And I oversee our Chicago community partnerships, as well as our national African-American LGBT and veterans partnerships. And since Roxanne took the lead on describing herself, I will do the same. I am a mixed race, 35-year-old gentleman wearing a green shirt and light short hair and light skin as well. I've never done that before, Roxanne. That was fun.
Oh, good. It's kind of funny trying to describe yourself, right? I'm like, yeah. I don't know. I look like myself.
Yeah. And I'm in a conference room, so the lighting's always a challenge at work.
Great. So this is the ERG Leader Roundtable. We'll hope you'll share with us commentary about your ERG. I did forget to mention that I am also the Gender Equity Chair for Pride at CNA, which is our LGBTQ plus and ally group. I was previously the president of that as well. So I think we're going to head and go and get started. I would say that maybe we can start it off by saying, how have you maintained engagement virtually during COVID? What have been some of your challenges with that? What do you look like when you go back to the office or have a mix of virtual and in-person? And I open that up to anyone. I see we have the first hand raised from Eric. Eric, if you want to start us off.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Eric Krull, pronouns he, him, his. I think in a lot of ways, and this is going to be really weird to say, COVID helped our BRC at Northern Trust. When we were doing events in person, we had on average 15 people, 20 people, maybe if we were offering cookies or something to show up to our events. And so we were in a weird sort of middle ground where things weren't going all that great. And then when we went into the virtual space, we said, we just have to, shoot our shot. Like, we took some calculated risks with the sorts of programming that we were doing. We did like a whole 5-week webinar series on called Breaking Down the Acronym, where we went through the LGBTQ+ acronym, and we discussed 24 of the letters in the acronym. We worked with the Quality Institute a couple times. We just did some new sort of programming that maybe we wouldn't have necessarily done before, and that I think might have even scared our DE&I group a little bit. They were like, "Are you sure about this?" And we were like, "No, trust us. This is going to be good," because I mean, Zoom fatigue is a very real thing. I get tons of emails and events about like, come listen to this fireside chat or this panel discussion. And if it's not something new or different, I get to the first sentence and I'm already asleep. So we decided we need to try and do something totally new and totally different. And from that, we were able to see our attendance go up to, on average, 70 people attending our events. So we had a 300% increase, which is unbelievable. And we've just sort of ridden that momentum throughout the course since then. We formed a member at large committee where now since we're doing everything virtually, we're partnering more with our employees across the country. We've got people from New Jersey and Arizona and California and Florida who are giving their ideas and are coming up with new opportunities to partner with new organizations and offer things that are brand new. I literally just got off of another event where you partnered with Frameline, which is the company that runs the San Francisco Film Festival. And we partnered with our Latin Heritage group to discuss a film called El Canto del Colibri, which is all about Latinx immigrants and their LGBTQ+ children and family members. And so we had a panel discussion around that. We partnered with them in June for Pride Month about 50 Years of Fabulous, which is all about the Imperial Court. And we had the director, the producer, and the Imperial Empress of San Francisco come in and speak to everybody. So it's about doing these new things and saying we wanted to collaborate with everybody and realizing that all of the other BRCs at Northern are in the exact same position. We can't get into the office. We don't know when we're going to be able to get into the office. And we're all kind of struggling to maintain that engagement with people. So by reaching out to them and putting together these collaborative events, it's really been able to strengthen the quality of the events that we're doing. And we're getting in a whole bunch of new fresh faces that are saying, I need to go to your events. I need to sign up for your membership list because you've sort of gotten the sweet spot. And not to pat ourselves on the back too much, but NT Pride is sort of like we're now like the example of like everybody else, you should be doing this sort of thing. Collaborate more, think creatively, get outside the box. Don't just regurgitate the same thing over and over because that's only going to turn people off.
Thank you so much for sharing, Eric. I'm going to pass it over to Lisa. I saw your hand raised next.
Thanks, Roxanne. So I'm with the Nature Conservancy, which is a global environmental conservation organization. All of our employee resource groups are global in scope. So nearly all of our activities, or most of them, were virtual before the pandemic. But I feel like we have increased the number of virtual events and also some of the social cohesion in our group. Some of the things that we've been doing differently are having a mix of, business-oriented gatherings and then social gatherings. So for people that really want to dive in at a programmatic level, we have things like working sessions on allyship and developing programs related for that. We also have social hours where we might be playing trivia. For Pride Month, we had a drag queen bingo event. So really pretty, like a lot of variety in the ways to connect. Also, because we're global, really varying the times that these events are held. So some of them are during traditional 9 to 5 North America office hours, but we really work to make sure that those times are rotated so that people both have an opportunity to participate during their normal working hours as well. For some, it's easier. It's hard to step away during the business day, but easier to join for a social hour in the evening. So rotating both the types and the times of the events that we offer has been helpful.
Great, thank you so much. And then Paul and then Michael.
Thanks, Roxanne. My name is Paul D'Souza. I lead the talent management group at Ulta in Bolingbrook. My pronouns are he, him, and very similar to what Eric shared, it helped advance the work. We don't have formal ERGs yet. We're on a journey toward that, but under the broader Pride umbrella and LGBTQ, I lead the efforts there. We support our corporate office. We have about 1,300 retail locations, and we have 6 distribution centers. So prior to COVID, it was really easy for something to be happening at the office and nobody else was involved. And now being able to really pull the voices in from our stores, our distribution centers, and having that just raising the level of both engagement and also just the discussion. And when we think about our store populations in particular, we've been able to touch and tap into those stories in a much deeper way, and giving them a platform to share their experiences with a broader team that maybe we wouldn't have even had the opportunity to do before. And I think we do get Zoom fatigue, and that it truly is a real thing, but we've also found that it's a little bit easier, I think, sometimes for people to truly be vulnerable and share when they're at home alone, in their office at home, versus maybe being on a stage, at events. So we've just even seen the level of discussion get that much more personal and deeper, which then kind of just creates that better sense of community. So, we've learned so much over the last, 18 months or so that really looking forward to thinking about how to apply that when we do get back into this more hybrid environment next year, making sure we don't lose some of those things that were really the benefits of us, not being together.
Great, thanks for sharing. And over to Michael.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. And I just wanted to call out a few things that I'm hearing from folks too that I think are really relevant, is that, sort of this new world that we're in with virtual allows more people to participate and feel comfortable. But I've also found even within our ERG and planning things, we're able to bring in more experts, right? I mean, it's so much easier to just beam someone in than trying to, arrange travel for them or, kind of have this experience in person. And I agree with you. Similarly, we've had greater attendance, more senior leadership participation as well. And I would say one of the things too that I loved hearing is that other groups are collaborating together amongst the ERGs and like bringing in, diversity. We actually had for Pride this year, I'll give an example of what we did. We tried to focus on marginalized communities within the LGBTQ scope that maybe people don't hear as much about. And so we had a transgender speaker from the Brave Space Alliance. We had someone who was a member of the Two Spirits community from Canada to kind of talk about this just sort of different experience. Because oftentimes what we found before is our events were very campus focused, and it tended to be the same people who would come out for these. But like once people were like, oh, this is something I don't know a lot about, but I'm interested and want to find out more, they were more willing to join, and we were getting people from across our North American offices. So I've just found that that's kind of been a benefit of having this virtual. Now the question will be, how do we all maintain that momentum going forward, which I'd be interested to hear if anyone is now hybrid, because we just returned to office about 2 weeks ago. And so it'll be interesting now to see if people's engagement levels will be at the same, or if now we're back in the office and it'll return kind of to that status quo. So I would love to hear from that on other folks. But another question that I would also put out to this group is sort of, how are you building your ERG up? And so this can happen in different ways. So I've seen in some companies, there's been situations where it's a paid position. So you might actually, receive like extra dollars to lead this ERG group, or it could be part of your sort of annual review process, or even your career development and planning. So like, putting it as part of your personal development plan. So I'm curious to know, are any of your ERGs sort of in that state of, sort of incorporating it into your day job, I guess? Because a lot of people I know say, oh, this is my, not exactly PC term, but this is my gay job and this is my day job. And it's like, how do you actually merge those to be part of one? And has anyone had success with that on this call? I'd be intrigued here.
And a reminder, you can use the raise hand function if you want to comment.
Totally. Maybe no one has had success with that, and that's fair. I was just curious to know if anyone has had. Oh, Mike, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Mike Summers with Aon. So we just this year started adding in goals for the ERGs. So all the co-leaders across all the resource groups we have, and Aon's sort of a multinational company, so it's a broad group. But we all added 4 goals into our annual review process. So I haven't seen what it's going to look like when we actually do our reviews, but we set the goals in so that when we take time away from our day jobs, that it reflects in the review process. So it doesn't look like we're slacking off. We're actually doing stuff for the company, and we can sort of articulate that in the review process. So that's something new this year. I'm pretty excited about it.
I muted myself trying to speak. Roxanne, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for sharing. I saw we had a comment in the chat saying that Lisa from the Nature Conservatory mentioned formalizing our ERG leadership roles as fellowships, ranging from 10 to 25% of the time. My question for you is that paid? Is that in addition to your job? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so fellows receive the same salary that they would normally receive, that their responsibilities should be adjusted to accommodate for that 10 to 25%. So they're not expected to do 125% of time. In most cases, their salary continues to be paid by their traditional business unit. However, there are some cases where we need to change how salaries are paid because we're a nonprofit. We receive, for example, government grants. In some cases, we need to shift unrestricted funds to cover that time, but it is, just a normal salary. It is considered part of our professional development. So there are objectives for success and growth. And to Jeremy's question, we do have training and development as part of that. We have at least one retreat per year for all of our ERG leaders, where some of that training is provided, as well as other opportunities which aren't as standardized, but really kind of vary depending on the goals of the ERG.
Great, thank you. And to kind of piggyback off of all of this, I saw a lot of people saying no, your ERG leadership is maybe part of your development plan, but it's not strictly paid. Do you have any paid positions in your company related to the D&I space? Or any dedicated chief diversity officers, things like that?
So I can answer to that, being that, and I have a couple different viewpoints. So I originally, when I was onboarded with Walgreens, I wasn't too involved with BRGs like I was with my prior company, but being that I'm the chair of the corporate committee for HRC for our local chapter, and needing to fundraise, my initial thought was that I would be reaching out to the BRG. And being that we're such a large company, the Walgreens Pride Alliance doesn't really control those funds like a smaller company, because there is, that factor of we have so many different departments that are considering those factors, DEI and community outreach and all those different stakeholders. So it was originally, it was a matter of joining the BRG and taking a chair and taking the time to meet up with all those separate stakeholders and getting to know them and seeing how we could incorporate our efforts and build that relationship. for sure.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And I would say too, on that, the same point, you know, because you kind of mentioned it about kind of the funds that you get. How are you securing funds for your ERG? Because I know from our perspective at MolsonCoors, you know, we have a DEI team of about, I think it's 4 individuals now, one who actually oversees ERGs within that role and kind of submitting their budgets and, you know, kind of planning out like, here's what we're going to do for the year. And here's ideally what we want our budget to look like. But I know it's always the challenge each year is like kind of justifying your funds and going through that process. Has anyone found success in just, you know, securing additional funding or, you know, kind of even increasing the funding that you've got for your ERG that you want to share with the group? Because I think these tips would be helpful for folks.
Hey, Michael, I could go. We just actually started going through our SLT and we kind of created a business proposal for increasing our spend for the Pride Alliance ERG. And so that's really what we're trying to do. And it's figuring out how we could have all of the rest of the SLT being able to go above what is allocated for the ERG budgets.
That's interesting. I have a question too for you on that, Constantine, as a follow-up. Do you have like executive sponsors for each of the ERGs? I know that's something we kind of have too, where you can kind of, you might have your budget from DEI, but then you go to your executive sponsor and say, hey, can I get this?
We have everyone from the C-suite. So we do have executive sponsors. So we have an executive and a senior leadership. So we have 2 kind of a co-sponsor, and we're figuring out ways to impact kind of from the executive level and also from the SLT too.
Fantastic. That's great. And I see some other folks are sharing things in the chat as well. It sounds like, I know Lisa said that ERGs received the same centralized budget when they began. $25,000 a year. Wow, that is a great ERG budget. I will speak to that, knowing where I am. We definitely do not have that amount, but that is fantastic to hear. Any other stories of success and just securing funding and planning your budgets for the year that folks want to share?
I can pitch in for this.
Yeah,
there's 2 different kind of types of funds as I see it, like restricted and unrestricted, if you will. So, you know, we have $15,000 that we can dedicate to LGBTQ plus focused not-for-profits. Each of our ERGs are given the same amount to spend on not-for-profits that kind of align with their group. And that's more a part of like social responsibility, corporate responsibility. I find that companies are very willing to kind of reallocate some of the funds that they would have normally gave to doing that, just because they were going to give it already. The more difficulty we find is asking for funds for general events, right? Things like, you know, paying for speakers or paying for, you know, technology hosting, food supplies, those types of things. But I would say generally we spend somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 a year on those types of spending. I think right now, just because the virtual, we haven't spent much of that. So that is a benefit of going virtual right now, not having to use as much as those funds overall.
Yeah, I'm hearing some budget jealousy amongst the groups, which I totally feel that. So I mean, I'll share one other thing too in the same space around securing funding and kind of making this part of your, you know, sort of day job that I've had is I always encourage people to include that in their sort of year-end reviews as like your, you know, part of your leadership skills that you've sort of developed over the year. Because I think oftentimes, especially if you're not a person like a people manager, you kind of need to point to different experiences of where you have done that in different cases. And so I always make sure to encourage my team to like make sure you put your ERG activities in that sort of review, even though it's not part of your job. It's good that your boss or whoever you report to is understanding of your other involvement within the company, because ERGs really do set the culture a lot of times for the company. And so I always try to emphasize to folks that it's not just like, oh, you're doing this as an option. You're like helping make the company more inclusive and a better place to be. So hopefully people are doing that. And I would encourage you if you aren't. Roxanne, any other questions that you want to add to the mix too?
No, that's a great point there, Michael, though, about including specific items that you're achieving that are for sure outside of your normal set of roles and responsibilities into your performance review. I think that's going to help build the case for why some of these positions should be paid or, should lead to more funding. So we're halfway through the discussion. We do have a few more prepared questions. However, I want to open it up to the group right now to see if anybody has any questions that they want to ask of others about ERG leadership. So feel free to raise your hand if you have a question to ask.
Or
and if you don't,
trying to solve.
Yes. Okay, so we have a hand raised from Mike.
Hi, so we're getting ready to go into sort of budget planning season. And so maybe my question to the group is what are you guys doing to prepare for budgets? So I'm gonna do like a roundtable with everyone in the Pride group just to figure out what people want to do this year. We were talking about sort of events earlier, and our membership has sort of declined throughout the year as far as events go, people not showing up. So I want to get a feel for what people want to do so we can keep that membership up. So I'd like to hear what other people are planning and what you're setting up as far as 2022.
Thanks for the question, Mike. So just to reiterate, the question to the group is, how are you planning to go about your budgeting for the next year? And we open that up to everybody. As a reminder, if you want to introduce yourself with your name, your pronouns, and your company, it would be greatly appreciated. So we'll open this to Eric first.
So what we did last year and what we're going to be doing this year is we kind of just like go through and like check off the box of like, these are the things that we know we're already going to have. We know there's going to be X amounts going to Out and Equal, X amounts going to Chamber of Commerce of Illinois, X amounts going to Out in Finance. And then we sort of look at, our change purse, because we've got about $25 then to put on about 15 events throughout the rest of the year. And we always go off of what our budget was for like the previous year. And we make it a point to make sure that every dime is being allocated and to really emphasize this is, we did this year. This is why this was successful. This is why we're going to do this again. And this is why you need to give us this amount of money. We also are in the process of making an effort to reach out to some of the other senior leaders to see if we can partner with different business units to do some bigger things, because we'd like to get more involved and do more stuff, because right now a lot of the sponsorship that Northern does is it comes out of our budget almost entirely. DE&I does pick up a portion of it for some things, and our supplier diversity group picks up some of it for other things, but the rest of it falls onto us. And so when it comes down to what sort of programming we're doing, we're like, well, we would love to bring in this speaker, but we just can't do that. So we have to spin straw into gold and come up with a more cost-effective, AKA free version of whatever that is, and just sort of rely on the connections that we've made as leaders in the BRC with some of our other partner organizations to see if there's a way that we can possibly do something that isn't going to completely bankrupt us. But we have very high hopes. We are actually on the topic of executive sponsors. Our executive sponsor, she's been with us for the past 3 years. She signed on for an extra year. But she's going to be rolling off in a couple months, and we just put in our requests for a couple people. So we're like, okay, these are people that probably have got some money in their pockets. We're going to absolutely be, seeing if they can float us a little bit, increase our allowance.
Roxanne, you had your hand raised as well.
Yeah, those were some great points, Eric. A few things that I keyed into to kind of what we do at Pride at CNA. So again, Roxanne Meyer, she, her pronouns, CNA Insurance. We have an executive sponsor as well. He's the vice president of claims for CNA. And what he calls it is tin cupping. He goes to some of the business unit leaders and see who has some funds left in their areas and how we can kind of do maybe kind of like a cross group type event. So for example, when we wanted to sponsor Shop Pride with the LGBT Chamber of Commerce of Illinois in July this year, it was a natural pairing for us to work with the small business unit to help sponsor that. And so we were able to get it to come out of their funds instead of the Pride's budget in order to put that on. Also, another great point that you brought up was kind of like the best case, middle case, worst case scenario for an event, right? Of like, if we had unlimited budget, this is what we would need. If we could go with a middle ground, this is what we would need. And if it needs to be free, this is what it's going to look like. So I think those are all kind of good ideas. And then kind of going back to one of the earlier points someone made, working with the other ERGs is probably the best way to get additional funds as well, especially if another ERG hasn't used much of their funds that year, or it just makes a better case to the business or your D&I group as to why you need more funds, because you're amplifying the impact that much more. So does anybody else have any commentary? Jeremy, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, so I just have a question. Something I think Eric or someone just said this. And so this was new to me because I think, Eric, you were talking about your sponsor leaving and you all have submitted names about who you want to be your sponsor. And so obviously as someone who's not in an ERG, I always just sort of thought that someone like the CEO selected a senior leader sort of volunteered themselves. So what you just said was a very different sort of idea or sort of option to me. So I'm wondering how others, have their sponsors. Do others have the same? Is that how it is for everyone, or how are y'all getting y'all sponsors? Is what I'm asking.
I can just kind of go off, explain it a little bit more. So for us, what they do so the tenure for an executive sponsor is 2 years, and at the end of that, the DE&I group sends a list of SVPs and above and executives to everybody and says, here's the full list, here's everybody who's available, rank whoever you would like, give us like your top couple choices, and then they reach out to those sponsors. And a lot of times it'll be based off of whatever strategy we're trying to do, what direction that we'd like to take, who's been super involved, because I think there probably are some executive sponsors that would say, I prefer to be with this group, or I prefer to be with this group, or I wouldn't want to be a part of, any of these groups in that kind of capacity, because there is a lot that goes into it. So I think by giving the BRCs that bandwidth to say, this is who we're looking at, these are who we think the ideal candidates would be, I think there's that there's that sense of camaraderie and that sense of collaboration. And I think that, it does butter up whoever gets picked. Like, this group said your name, as opposed to somebody, throws a dart at the board and says, okay, Joe Blow, you're going to be in charge of the Pride ERG for the next 2 years.
Thank you for sharing that, Eric. If people could use the reaction button in the Zoom features or enter in the chat, by a raise of hands, you can either raise the hands or use one of those other fun emojis. Who has an executive sponsor? Okay, looks like we've got quite a few people there. So maybe, people who raise their hands, you can lower them now. Another show of hands, who had them selected for them? Okay, so it looks like maybe about half or 70% or so of people who had executive sponsors had them assigned to them. How long do they serve? Does anybody want to comment on that? You know, of the people who raised their hand, what does that look like to you?
I'll speak up. Essentially, we're figuring it out as we go. Like I was saying earlier to this group, again, my name is Adam, pronouns are he, him. And our sponsor really wanted to see our organization have people resource groups. So he, I think, worked with our chief HR officer, got the idea going, and our LGBTQIA+ group was one of the first groups that were founded. So that was sort of the process. So we're really here learning how others, from what we've heard today, groups much more formalized and longer histories to have had that time to develop it. So I imagine it's probably very rooted in the history of like whatever that organization it is. So for us, we're kind of building it as we move along.
And Adam, what was company are you with?
Oh, sorry, Oak Street Health.
Okay, fantastic. All right,
Great, thank you.
And Lotus, I see. Oh,
yep, we're doing the same thing. Lotus, did you want to comment?
No, I did not, because Adam, we work at the same place.
Okay, great. And Paul, I see you have your hand raised. How was your executive sponsor kind of selected?
We're having those conversations now as we're kind of making this transition from a less formal ERG. They're not, we call it the Champions Network, but they're broken up very similar to an ERG to anyone looking in. But we're having that transition now because there were some of us who were just naturally, kind of drawn in. And the head of DNI back a couple of years ago asked me to take the lead for the Pride work, and I was happy to do so. And now we're having this conversation from an executive sponsor, what level are we looking for? So I think that's where we're, I'm a vice president, and can I move into that role and then have someone from our core team kind of take over some of the work I've been doing day to day to lead the work. So we're working through those conversations. But I think those of us who are serving as the sponsor, so to speak, right now, we fell into the role based on our passion and our desire to build the communities within our organization. But I'm hearing and learning lots of different things here to take back to my team back home to share with them as we're thinking about, having these conversations now as we're preparing to launch a more formal program in 2022.
That's great. And then Adam, did you want to share as well?
Yeah, I'd say what's been interesting this year, though our executive sponsor has been helpful, what's been very impactful and really has helped us become closer with our, I'll say our frontline team members. We're a network of primary care centers who serve in medically underserved communities. We have over 100 centers now, and I think like 22 states. Really, it's been, we hired a DE&I director, and now there are two, what we call PRG co-chairs, and they are from a project management team in the organization, and they're really helping to thread together the resources of the PRGs, both to ensure equity is provided depending on what their situation is. And then I think that's actually helped us to just start connecting with our center team. So it's not only in the kind of corporate space. That's one of our chief challenges or opportunities we're striving to do better on. So the executive has been helpful probably in advocating for that to some degree, but really most of the strength this year has really come from those leaders just helping us to organize together and then explaining as groups what our needs are. So if there are any teams here that are looking to kind of build up the strength, that's been one way to really join forces and have us all benefit from it.
Thank you, Adam, for sharing that too. So again, I know we're getting closer to time. We have about 13 minutes, but I do want to give people an opportunity to ask other questions or challenges that you all have, thinking through. Anyone have other questions for the group? Because really, this is an opportunity to learn from each other. If not, I've got one on deck. All right, well, my question actually was going to be for folks. Oh, Constantine, go ahead.
Hey everyone, I'm Constantine, he, him pronouns at US Foods. I think for us, we're relatively, the Pride Alliance, we kind of do not publicize our members, and we keep everything very confidential within our Yammer page, just to make sure that everyone feels comfortable. And I know that we have some field, and our field is about 70 distribution centers nationwide. And we're trying to figure out how to continue elevating the ERG to the field and getting a little bit more field participation. So if anyone's had any luck, with a field expansion for an ERG, if you're able to share kind of how you're able to really have success, and also thinking about different industries, especially in a distribution center, it might be people might be a little bit more hesitant to start engaging with an ERG. So thinking about what have you done to show acceptance within your population?
Great.
Yeah.
I see Z's hand raised. Oops.
Nope.
Z, we're having a little bit of a trouble hearing you. Can you speak more directly into the microphone?
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me switch something.
Okay,
Oh,
that's
there you go.
much
Yeah, you
better.
got it.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, now we can't hear you.
See if I can switch this over.
Oh, there you go.
We can hear you.
Okay. So I am from Allstate, and to kind of help you out with fields and how to get your fields more involved, I actually work for Allstate Benefits, which is a subsidiary company of Allstate. This is, of course, based up there in Chicago. We're actually based in Jacksonville, Florida. So we lucked out because we had one of our previous executive sponsors had come in from the Chicago office and noticed that there wasn't as much ERG going on in the Jacksonville office, and she was a very big driver in asking around to find out if people wanted to do that. She actually came up to my desk and asked me, "Hey, would you like to co-lead in Pride?" Because somebody else in the company had seen her magnet, her Pride magnet that she had up on her door. I know that's a little harder because we are more virtual now, but I think if people are comfortable talking to other folks and just kind of, it's a word of mouth almost type of thing of getting folks out and just asking them, "Hey, are you interested?" And so fast forward, here we are about 5 years later, and I got asked to join up with this, and hey, would you like to be involved? So I get to do a lot of these national opportunities where I get to hear from all of you guys and glean that back and take that not only to the national chapter, but also to our little neck of the woods down in Jacksonville.
That's great. Thank you, Z, for sharing that as well. And I was going to speak to that too, Constantine, to your question. We actually just started with our Black Employee Voices group, a field chapter, because similar to you, I think we have a lot of home-based sales employees who are across the country and, don't necessarily always see each other unless it's kind of a bigger team meeting. And I think one of the things that's worked well during COVID is having sort of a virtual meeting. So we've done activities where it's like a volunteer day where maybe everyone's volunteering on screen, if it's wrapping gifts around the holidays. That was something I know that the group did that was really successful. Even if it was just engagement. But I think one of the key things we all need to keep in mind as we return even to offices at some point, if you are, is like keeping that virtual element so that folks who are out in the field can still participate and be a part of those discussions. Because I think that's often those folks feel the most isolated. And so, doing those kind of group activities, whether it's a speaker or, something volunteering that you can all do together, is a good way to kind of keep that engagement and kind of show the big impact you can have as a group. That would just be my suggestion.
Yeah. I would say, so this has been a big challenge for us at Walgreens, seeing that we have over 9,000 stores and so many field employees. And they're truly, again, our face on the front line. They're where the buck stops, and they're really our most important asset. And we have to protect them. So up until this past year, we've only really had the benefit of BRGs to corporate employees. And in the past year, we've started 2 different chapters in regional areas. The first one being South Florida, the second one being Chicago, for field team members. And really trying to incorporate field leadership and field team members in the larger BRG has been a win. Taking that perspective into consideration on a larger scale in decision making and how we advocate for them is so important. But again, it's so integral, and it is hard to reach them. For us, our biggest stumbling block is that we don't issue email addresses specifically to all field members. It's really only specific to store managers and pharmacy managers. So that was one thing. How are we going to reach them to be able to get that buy-in and that involvement? So it's an ongoing initiative, and it's something we're really focused on this coming year.
Great, thank you so much. So we have 6 minutes left. We've got a fun question to ask everyone, so I hope you will all share. We've got 15 seconds though for each person, so let's keep this short. The fun question for everyone is, what is your favorite event that your employee resource group or company has done related to diversity and inclusion? I'll start. We do an annual event for Hispanic Heritage Month called Loteria, which is basically bingo. But it's a lot of fun. Everyone enjoys it. So Adam, over to you.
Well, this year, we did a celebration for Juneteenth. I actually think Lotus might have been a collaborator, but it was going to a neighborhood and doing, cleaning up and that kind of thing. So it was a day of service essentially, and it was very rewarding and great to be out and seeing each other in person outside.
Excellent, thank you. Mike?
So this year we did a joint event with our BPN group where we read a book by a Black gay author. And I found it really interesting to hear a lot of other people's perspectives as we read through the book. So we did a couple of meetings where we broke down the book into 3 sections. And I really enjoyed that as a virtual event.
Great. Michael?
I'm on the spot here. One of my favorite events that we ever did was we had Judy and Dennis Shepard come in to speak. And so really an opportunity across the company to have people engage and ask questions. And it really felt like a safe space, I think, for a lot of our allies that are members of the LGBT group to participate, because sometimes it's like, will I be identified as with this group? And I just thought it was a great opportunity because there's so many parents within our company. So it brought a different perspective to the table as well.
Great, thank you. Jacob?
Yeah, I would say that we have a great opportunity within Walgreens Pride Alliance that we have counterparts all over the world, mainly with Boots in UK. We all have counterparts with our roles. So there is a governance chair that I collaborate with Boots and vice versa with all the other chairs. And so when we can all plan an event together, it's a real great win because you get to see so many different perspectives. We do a lot of different panels. It really gives a great perspective for our allies. And that's been really fun. And it really highlights the intersectionality within our organization and really shows, a great reflection of our company values and people's experience within different roles within the organization and how it's affected them, so that our allies can really ask questions and be candid, and that's been fun.
Great, thank you. Constantine?
Yeah, so our Collective Asian Network connected with Asian Americans advancing justice to bring bystander training to our associates, and it was really impactful.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth?
I'm going to share something that actually was before our BRGs were created, but in our LGBTQ BRG was created, but in 2019, we hosted a panel in which our CEO interviewed the CEO of Howard Brown Health, as well as Priya Parrish from, oh my God, Impact Engine, almost blanked. And it was really great to kind of hear about both their work, their business work, as well as, their personal identity and how that impacts, the Chicago business community.
Great, thank you. Paul?
Sorry, I was on mute as usual. I think one of the most recent ones we did really was in support of National Coming Out Day. And we had parents of LGBTQ youth who had recently come out, and one is a member of our C-suite. And they shared their stories and just their open and their honesty and it's how they were feeling, and they were very raw about those emotions leading through that process as their son or daughter was coming out to them. And just the participation we had, the attendance, it was one of our most highly attended, and the questions, and you can see that it filled this gap within our community, across the stores. And it really brought together this sense of, truly allyship, and also created another support network where we saw connections being made afterward, and hearing that, gosh, I've met so many people virtually here that now I'm connecting with offline. So I think when we can bring people together across the org to, learn and listen, that was a pretty powerful event that just happened a couple weeks ago.
Great, thank you so much. And that is the last I see of people on video, and we are also at 2. So I'm going to wrap it up there. But if you have any other questions or want to connect with other employee resource group leaders, please feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. You can either share your LinkedIn throughout the rest of the day for the rest of the events in the chat boxes. You can also always reach out to the LGBT Chamber of Commerce of Illinois. They'll connect you with me and Michael, as well as some of our other ERG leaders that we're connected through. So we can, all share great ideas, questions, thoughts, and ways to stay connected. So with that, I thank you all for your participation today. This was wonderful to see and or meet you all virtually. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.